Today we are chatting all things Portra 800. If you're new here, my name is Hannah. I'm a travel and nature photographer, and if you've been here before, welcome back. We are going back to analog, baby. And maybe you can relate to this if you've done film photography before, but I feel like looking through the viewfinder of my film camera is very different than looking through the viewfinder of my EVF. It's almost like I put this different goggles on and I see the world a little bit differently. I slow down, I'm more patient, I get my composition so on point, and maybe that's because there's less of this relying on the post-production assembly line, because you walk around knowing you only have 36 shots. And honestly, let's face it, film photography is expensive, from buying the film itself to then getting it developed, right? So you want to get it perfect. You want it to look good out of camera. Whereas with digital photography, you can walk around and shoot as much as your memory card can hold. So it's very different. If you're new to film photography or a seasoned film photographer, you've probably heard of Portra 800 before. It's a very popular film stock, and to be honest, it's on the more expensive side. For 36 shots on a 35mm roll of film, it's going to cost you around $18. I had an upcoming stay at Treehouse Point here in Washington. I stayed there last year, so if you're interested in more of a vlog style video, you can check this one out here. Last year, I noticed the craftsmanship of this place was out of this world. It literally feels like where fairies live, and to shoot it on film, I just felt like that was the aesthetic I was after. With this film stock skewing warmer and typically more mild in saturation, I felt like it was going to be the perfect match for photographing all those really saturated greens in the forest. And with it being an 800 speed film, I knew I was going to be covered whether I was shooting outdoors and in the daylight, or if I was shooting indoors where it's typically a bit darker. That said, I did push all of these images either a half stop or a full stop. And of course, I was shooting with my trusty sidekick, the Contax T2. So the treehouse I was staying in was Ananda, and I knew from being there previously that it has this really gorgeous cedar siding, which I wanted to encapsulate that warmth that it already had naturally. And you can see in these images that the Portra 800 really shined in that aspect. Those cedar tones are truly warm. I was really hopeful for this reflection photo. I was hoping that it was going to, one, come out in focus, because with a Contax T2, you have autofocus, you don't have any control over manual focus. And I was very happy that it performed well, but on top of that, the Portra 800 really made the colors of this scene just pop. And another set of photos that I was really hopeful for were the ones of these shadows inside Ananda, the treehouse that we were staying in. And with an 800 speed film pushed a stop, I wasn't really sure how it was actually going to perform in those highlights. And it exceeded my expectations, because look at these highlights. They're perfect. You can see all of the detail with minimal grain, and the focus really hit on both of these photos. I'm pretty impressed with the amount of dynamic range that this film stock has. I live in the Pacific Northwest, so obviously greens are everywhere, and I knew I was stepping into Treehouse Point and there was going to be lots of greens. And I was honestly a little worried about how Portra 800 skewed a bit warmer in tonality, but that kind of played to my advantage, because it really created this tonality separation between all the different greens I was seeing. And so you have these deeper, more blue greens in hue, and then you have those more yellow greens in hue. So it really creates this separation and depth of field almost when you're looking at these photos. I'm pretty accustomed to Kodak Gold. I think it was the first film stock I ever shot on. And so I really do like the warmer, more golden highlights and things like that. And I was really pleased to see that the highlights in this Portra 800 were skewing a little bit on the warmer side. This is probably my favorite photo in the bunch. You can see that the highlights are warm and the greens are vibrant, and you're seeing that separation of tonality and you're seeing that warm structure, but you can't really make out, is it a building? Is it a cabin? Is it a tree? Like, it just looks like it's so mixed into the nature around it, and that's really the essence of what Treehouse Point is. It's mixing human existence with nature and really bringing you back to your roots, and I feel like this picture encapsulates what they were after when they were building Treehouse Point. And I think the key word in all of this is immersed. I wanted to feel immersed when I was looking at these photos. I wanted it to capture the experience, the essence of the experience of being at Treehouse Point, and I wanted that to translate through these photos to you. I wanted you to feel immersed in the trees with me. And there's a lot of detail, especially in that cedar siding, and the way it just complements the forest overall. It just feels like you're not separated from the nature, you're kind of one with the nature, which I really love. And that's really the entire point of this property, right? You're among it, it's quiet, you hear the river rushing, you hear the trees rustling, and you're in this structure that is one with those trees. On this last photo, look at those highlights. They're preserved. You can actually see that the sky was blue. Even though this film was pushed a stop, it still preserved those highlights. So to kind of sum Portra 800 up in my own words and in my experience using it in the trees, because this film stock will perform differently in other types of locations, I feel like it really did warm up those greens and warm up those highlights and really still had that tonality separation that I mentioned. So I'm keeping those green tones totally separate from one another. I'm still getting those deep evergreen greens and I'm getting those vibrant yellow greens. And on the note of saturation, it didn't feel like it was too much. It was perfectly mild and exactly what I like. And there's this film look that I do try to emulate in my digital photography. And if there was probably one film stock that I would try to emulate as close as possible, it would be Portra 800. And I do like Kodak Gold, but sometimes that can be a little too warm. So I feel like there is a really good balance in this Portra 800. And I did mention that there was grain, but it wasn't too much. I don't feel like it took away from these photos. If anything, it added a touch of nostalgia, which, I mean, I love film. I grew up analog, so it's really nice to have that touch on my photos. So there you have it, Portra 800 in the trees. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you're into film photography or digital photography, be sure to like and subscribe. It means the world to me. As always, thank you so much for watching, and I will catch you in the next one.